Wow. Here we are.
This almost didn't happen tonight.
Really?
Well, we were on the fence, but here we are.
Oh, yeah, that's true. We chose this over a movie.
Weird.
I don't know what that says about us. Welcome to episode 12
Yeah.
of the Everyone Belongs podcast. I'm Ben.
I'm Cammie.
And we are your hosts this evening. And our goal with this podcast is to go beyond tribes and systems to explore the question of if there's a love that's big enough for everyone. And the way we've chosen to go about this series or this project is by starting with our own story. Our story is why we started this podcast, so we felt like it would be somewhat disingenuous and confusing if we didn't tell you guys that, yes, we do have a dog in this fight. We have a motivation, we have a story, and we started off by sharing it. Now, tonight, this episode, I think is going to be kind of interesting. We had promised last week. We've gone through, I think, we're on episode 12, so we'd gone through 7 or 8 episodes of sharing our story. And then we went through 3 or 4 episodes of Q&A. And then this week, we were going to pick up where our story left off with kind of like what we currently believe. And I was like really not excited about that episode, but I'm like, you know what? Buck up. Just like try and define it. I know it's hard to explain and some of it you're still processing, but we owe it to the viewers. And then we had a change of plans because something very wonderful happened this week.
I guess you could put it that way.
And by wonderful,
Spicy.
I mean super shitty.
Yeah.
That I can't wait to share with you guys. But before we get into that, there's been a little bit of a discussion on some of the Facebook page type stuff about the language that we use. And without apologizing, I'm going to explain why we use the language that we use in a very brief manner, and then warn you that whatever language, if you're sensitive to language, this is not probably the episode for you. You can tune in next time, or maybe in a year or 2 or 5 when our language changes. But for now, this is the way we talk at home. This is the way we talk with each other. And this is the way we talk on the podcast. And we don't mean any personal offense to anyone. Actually, I don't mind offending a few folks, but it's not why we do it. So this is your warning now that I'm planning on getting excited this episode. And when I get excited, my language gets more colorful. And I like to call it colorful.
You might even get some excitement from me. We'll see. I think so.
That'd be fun. Okay, let's dive right into this. So, first of all, exciting announcement. We did it, you guys. We asked you guys for one favor on this planet, and it was to give us more than 100 reviews. And as of now, we have 109 reviews, and I'm proud to announce that all of you are the proud listeners of a 5-star podcast.
This is where
I know, the applause would be super nice, but we're pretty low-tech over here. We don't even have an intro. Sorry, Robin. Someday, maybe.
Someday.
But we don't have an intros. We will make up for in swearing today. Now, I want to break down these reviews for you because I think this is really fascinating. Out of 109 reviews, 95 of those reviews are 5-star reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's really surprising to me.
That is weird, isn't it?
Like, I don't know if it's because if they're rating it so highly because of how impacted they've been by just listening to it in a positive way.
I want to give just a very short amount of time of some explanation about behind the scenes here making this podcast. One, as we already pointed out, we don't have an intro. We also have zero editing that goes into this. This is like, and we're not proud of this. It's just kind of like where we're at and the amount of time that we have to do this. I'm not bragging. I'm just stating facts. We have no budget for this podcast. We haven't invested $1 in it. Actually,
That's
well,
not true.
how is that not true?
Well, we just got some chairs.
Yeah, that's true. I guess
But we're not sitting in them right now.
It's kind of confusing because we kind of have two podcasts, and I actually bought all this stuff for the other podcast, but so it is a bit confusing.
Oh,
but
yeah.
we bought the mics and stuff, so I guess in that way there's like probably $400 worth of gear. And we record this in our basement pretty consistently while our kids are doing some sort of like go-kart gladiator sports on the thin wood floors right above our heads. So to get 95 5-star reviews tells me something. And that is that people value the story more than they do the production.
That's what I feel.
Which is really cool. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh.
We have 4 4-star reviews. Mm-hmm. Screw all you guys. Just kidding.
It's fair. It's fair.
No. Actually, if I was to rate our podcast, I don't think I could rate it above 4 stars.
Because of the production quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 4-star reviews. You guys might be the only honest guys out there.
Yeah.
Mad respect. Okay. Then we have 4 1-star reviews. Now I've kind of shared.
Okay, 0 3-star, but I guess they can.
Hey, listen. Are you hosting this or am I hosting this?
You're hosting. I'm just keeping you honest. So 0 3-star.
Okay, but
You're okay. You got your method.
yes.
Got it.
We have 4 1-star reviews. And we've previously gave an explanation as to why we think that is. Because, like I said, 4-star review, I would give our podcast 4-star. I totally would understand if someone gave it a 3-star. 1-star, my guess is those are people that don't listen but don't want this message to be heard.
Or people that really don't like swearing.
That's true. Okay, but this week, you guys, something very fun and fascinating happened. We got our first and only 2-star review. And to understand why this is special, we're actually going to read this review and spend the entire episode talking about this because I think it's so fascinating. Because this 2-star review came from someone that I would consider a friend from our previous life. And not only did they send a review, they sent me a message announcing to me that they were making the 2-star review. So it's like a review plus a review announcement. So I think I'm just going to start off by reading that. Do you mind? Or do you want to do it?
Sure.
All right.
Why not? Okay, so I'm reading the message first.
So this was a personal message sent to me.
I'm not a big fan of how you are calling out names and websites and maligning people's character. I think there is a healthier way for you to process and heal. The story isn't as black and white as you have presented it with Stephen, David, and Jeremy as power-hungry villains. Sorry again you are so hurt, but waging war isn't going to bring the freedom you may be imagining it might. I almost gave 3 stars, but it gets a bit rambly at times.
See, and this is a guy that I worked with for a while. We'll get into that. But can I just say, it is really rambly.
Sure.
Rambly as fuck, I think.
Yeah, it's because, it's not very low produced, not edited.
We're not radio personalities.
That's really
here.
the only thing I will say out of this whole message I agree with.
But I want to start with the positive. And I think but he didn't give it 3 stars, but he almost gave it. Wait, that's confusing. He almost gave it 3 stars? Oh, so he was going to give it 3 stars.
Yeah,
but then he says it's rambly, so then instead of 3, he gave it 2.
Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. So if we could make it less rambly, he'd make it 3.
He might change his review. Doubt it.
Okay, now it's time for the actual review.
Okay.
Would you like to read it?
Yes, I would love to.
You got to give the title and
Okay.
give the username.
Title, Burning Down the House, John PDX.
January 2nd, 2020.
January 2nd. Ben, a self-proclaimed extreme personality, tells the story of his family's excommunication from a religious community and extended family. In telling the story, Ben calls out names and websites of his foes. He focuses on how his family allegedly became victims of spiritual abuse coming from at least 3 separate Cincinnati-based Christian ministries. Many people find Ben's rawness refreshing and his extreme nature exhilarating. This reviewer does as well. However, while I am not part of the story, I know many of the people involved and warn listeners to take Ben and Cammie's bereavement with a grain of salt. Their pain is real, but the facts are edited to create clear villains and victims. While Ben has inspired many with his family endurance challenges, running ultramarathons as a family, through hiking the Appalachian Trail as a family, his ultimate endurance challenge has begun. How long can his family wage war with his relatives, former business partners, and previous spiritual mentors? Can I just say, I resent the fact that he stated your name, I think 5 times, and my name once. I mean, I know you're the fucking host, but come on.
Technically, we're both co-hosts here.
I know. I'm like, what the fuck? Okay. Well, that's my first grievance of this.
You were raging about that earlier. It was the first thing you said when you read it, and I was like, that's your main beef? Okay.
That's not my main one.
Okay.
But that's...
It's just your first one.
Yes. I just have to get that one out of the way.
So this review is so fascinating to me. It's very strategically well written. Almost like it's written by a guy that wrote professional scripts for videos that are 2 to 3 minutes long, which I also did. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we just have to get into this because I don't even know where to start. So what's fascinating about this is there's the right sprinkling of like giving us a nod, like acting like, acting like we deserve some sort of credibility without actually giving us any. He kind of says, he's like kissing our ass here, where it says, many people find Ben's rawness refreshing and his extreme nature exhilarating. It sounds like a porn ad. This reviewer does as well. However, so he's kind of saying like, oh, they're great. Then he says at the bottom, well, Ben, not Cammie, has inspired many with his family endurance challenges. So he's kind of like, it's almost like, how Eminem at the end of the 8 Mile, he like tosses out all his faults before, who is it? What's the guy's name? Dang it, I can't remember it. Anyways, whoever the guy he's battling against in the rap, so that the guy has nothing to say. He's like kind of saying like, he's kind of like paying homage to our efforts and our cred so that it doesn't come across as just he's blasting us.
So that
it's so whitewashed.
He can be heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But really what's so fascinating here is these are the main accusations, and I want to look at it. Okay, so he has a couple beefs. He has the names and websites thing, which we'll talk about. He really doesn't like that because he mentions that in the personal message and in the review. And then there's this fascinating lingo he uses. He focuses on how his family allegedly became victims of spiritual abuse, coming from at least 3 Cincinnati-based Christian ministries. And then he says, I know many of the people involved. So now he's kind of playing his card, which is the main reason why he's writing this review, which I think is to say, don't trust what we're saying. I know many of the people involved and warn listeners to take Ben and Cammie's bereavement with a grain of salt.
Well, are you going to point out here that while I'm not a part of the story...
I want to get to that later.
Oh, okay.
Their pain is real, but the facts are edited to create clear villains and victims. So I want to focus on that line for a second and ask the question, do we have on our hands here a real story justice warrior? Is this person, because they're saying facts are edited, there's a grain of salt, there's many versions of the story, it's not black or white, all of which I completely agree with, by the way.
And I think we've even said if he would have actually listened to all of our episodes, which I kind of doubt he did.
But these kind of like vague warnings are really, they're not meant to really challenge people to hear both sides. They're really meant to discredit our side. Mm-hmm. And knowing this person for the last 3 years, we have inside information to this. And I'm just going to like kind of let the cat out of the bag to our listeners because I think this is really important. Man, I'm stressing out. There's like so much to say and so little time. We only have 45 minutes. If you decide to go public with your side of the story, there is a good chance you will face this type of argument and this type of attack. And I'm going to just flat out call it an attack. It's very clearly an attack. An attack on our character, an attack on our story, an attack on our credibility, an attack of our validity, attack of our facts, although not specifically. So this, I want to walk through this specifically because this is so normal. And it's very rare for us to receive straightforward feedback like this. Most people are talking about this kind of stuff behind our back, and we've heard about it third person, but it's not something we can actually, that's publishable. But because this is a public review, I think it's very valuable to go through it. So this John PDX's, that's the username on iTunes, is saying, hey, let's be well-rounded here and hear both sides. Well, here's the interesting thing. When we were being accused by the other side for a period of 3 years, and we had a pretty intimate relationship that I can get into, but we did high school camp, we founded numerous businesses. The largest business.
I grew up in the same church with him. Yeah.
He never once called us to ask us our side of the story. In fact, when he kind of said that he was discontinuing our normal contact based upon a side of the story he had heard, my last question to him was, are you interested in hearing another side of the story? To which he said no. So that leads me to believe that this is actually not about giving the story a fair shake. This is about getting a certain side of the story more airtime and a certain side of the story which he doesn't believe. And I'm fine if he doesn't believe it. He doesn't have to believe our facts. Like, he hasn't fact-checked them, I suppose. But, I have proof. I can verify, I think, almost any of the facts that we stated in our story through email, through audio. So my question is about this person, was he, as these other people were accusing us of all these things over these years, was he taking that with a grain of salt? Or is he only asking people to take our side of the story with a grain of salt? And that's how you really know, if people are willing to apply the same justice meter to both sides, I guess, if it really is justice they're after. Otherwise, I would argue it's actually something else they're after.
Yeah.
And it was only after 3 years that we started to tell our story that we start to hear this grain of salt business. Mm-hmm. So one thing that, has been very difficult to us, knowing that there's two sides of the story and deciding whether to actually come out and tell it, is this belief that we're not saying the other side of the story is not valid. I'm sure there's testimony that could be published and other people could release episodes and talk about horrible things that we've done. And I'm not going to say it's false. Some of it I'm sure will be, but some of it I'm sure will not be. We're not discrediting another side. All we're saying is that we're not willing to let our side go untold anymore. Now, I want to give a little bit more context here. That's just fascinating facts to me. One is that in the last 4 years, we've released more than 1,000 videos on YouTube. Okay. More than 60 podcasts. Now, do you know how many are dedicated to telling the story of oppression and abuse, alleged abuse that he's talking about? 3. There's 3 episodes dedicated to telling our story and 3 follow-up episodes to questions that our viewers had that we're answering. So 6. So someone could figure out that percentage. What is that? Less than 0.5% of our videos are dedicated to the story. So my question to this type of accuser would be, are you saying that all 1,060 videos of ours are uncalled for and should be taken with a grain of salt? Or just these 3? And if so, how are these 3 so different from the other 1,060? Or is it just that you don't like the content of these 3? Because our videos have some pretty obvious through lines. We've built an audience off of trust and by consistently sharing what's been on our hearts as honestly as we possibly can. Yeah. So I want to give you a few other facts about what we have done, because I think this is important. One is that we waited more than 3 years after devastating events transpired and after processing with a professional therapist before doing anything besides vaguely alluding to pain. So for 3 years, and most people, this is not their normal life. They're not vloggers. We have been vloggers, and we vlogged about everything. We vlogged about our sex life. We vlogged about parenting difficulties. We vlogged on the trail with CPS taking our kids away. We vlogged about hate comments and being accused of all sorts of things. We went into the tricky areas. This area we held back from for 3 years because I was so cautious about wanting to ruin other people's names. I think way too much so, by the way. Then, after 3 years, when we did go public with a story, we created an alternate channel. And instead of publishing the story to our 40,000 subscribers, we published it to an audience which at the time was 0 and now is up to 2,000. It's 5% of the audience of our other page, even now. And that now is the biggest it's ever been. In addition to that, on this story, we have actively discouraged people from harassing anyone in the story, and I have a very liberal definition of harassment. To me, harassment is pushing information on anyone that doesn't even want it. And we were very, very careful about what names we used and why. And I wanted to get into this also because this is something that was really scary to me. These are family members. These are people that we were in relationship with, that we cared deeply about, and that we believed cared deeply about us. And in some ways, I don't want to discount that. I think that could also be true. But at a certain point, especially after certain people aren't in touch with us for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and our story is our story. Most of you guys have heard it. We have faced what I would consider spiritual abuse. And he says alleged. I would love to hear him answer why he used that word alleged. Which facts are you challenging?
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm gonna get into that. Oh, just hold me back, Cammie. Hold me back.
No, I don't want to.
Okay. But I will say we were very careful about what names we used and why. We balance a fine line between journalistic integrity. I'm not just going to say some guy said this. Let's name him Bob. Because these are real events, and there's real credibility on the line, and there's other people's lives on the line, including ours. But there's other people that are still involved with these people. But I didn't want to use any names that weren't necessary for the integrity of the story. But what's ironic about this is his blanket fucked up pussy accusations. Am I allowed to say that?
Yes.
Thank you. See, hear that? People that got offended, a woman validated that. They tossed this kind of like hand grenade of discredit without ever saying why. And it shows the very reason why we had to use names to begin with. Because if you're going to like try and discredit us and say, oh, that never happened, the only thing we have to stand by right now, we lost majority. We lost security. We lost peace of mind. We lost the comfort that we had from community. The only thing we have are facts. And at first that was really scary. I thought it was not enough. And the fact that I'm having to make this argument now shows that in that world, it's still not enough. But outside that world, I'm not trying to convince John PDX here. I'm actually trying to show people that have, especially people that have been through this, maybe a method for finding sanity. Because you will be discredited. And you might even discredit yourself because the majority will say you're crazy, which is the ultimate definition of gaslighting. They call to question your sanity by saying fucking bullshit words like alleged. That 100% covers their ass and 100% throws you under the bus. Oh, now I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what we have not done, I just told you what we did. What we have not done is release last names, with one exception.
A couple slips.
That was an accident, and guess what? I still don't even give a fuck. Because...
It was a good one to pick, I think,
I agree.
out of all those names.
But because we're not trying to toss out names, because our goal is not to throw people under the bus or ruin people's reputations or get people fired or anything like that, but I'm also not afraid of it. My goal is also not to protect them. So it didn't freak me out. If we could use people's last names or we could not, I would prefer to not because I don't think it's really necessary and helpful to the story. I want to use give the minimum amount of information to
keep
back
the
up
story powerful enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What we have also not done is released specific websites. We've used specific names for content. I mean, it's so weird that that's what upsets him, is that we're calling out organizations. Like, would this be said about Henry Weinstein or, other abusive organizations? I guess it's so weird. Okay, other things we have not done. And these are important because we've actually thought about them, called for a boycott. We could have asked people, and this is a very normal thing to do. By the way, a lot of our viewers said this about the Bible camp, about other things. It's like, how could you send your kids there? Don't go. Don't support it. Don't ask all your viewers to basically boycott. Start spamming people to let them know this story. And we haven't done that. We haven't picketed. This one of these organizations is actually teaching family conferences in Cincinnati about God's design for family as they're in the dark treating our family, basically disowning our family.
Yeah.
And we also haven't asked our listeners to sabotage or even share our message. We're not saying, hey, spread this to everyone you know, or hey, reach out to churches. And those are all actually very normal things to do.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to, let's read this quote that was actually very inspirational to me. And I have a feeling this is going to land with some of you because there's this thing called Stockholm Syndrome, which is bad enough. And please forgive me if I get this wrong, but my understanding of this is the very cursory understanding of Stockholm Syndrome is the desire to protect your oppressors. Mm-hmm. You start to form this relationship with them subconsciously.
Attachment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even though they abused or oppressed you, you still have this like kind of knee-jerk compulsion to defend them. So even for years after this happened, I felt guilty, almost embarrassed to share this story with these names because I felt embarrassed for these people. But this is one of the quotes that convinced me to help share this.
You own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better. Anne Lamott.
I think Anne Lamott is even like a churchy person. Or maybe not churchy, that's the wrong word. Sorry, Anne, sorry. My bad. Sorry. I did not mean to say
Spiritual,
that. But I think she wore a Christian hat at one point at least. So going back to this kind of question, is this person really after facts? Because if you read the comment again, I just want to read this comment because on face value it says allegedly became victims. He says, I know many of the people involved and warn listeners to take Ben and Cammie's bereavement with a grain of salt. So even there, he kind of discounts our testimony by making it sound as if it's this emotional venting. Then he says, the pain is real, but the facts are edited to create clear villains and victims. So I want to ask this question based upon what we know. Is this reviewer, or really anyone in this mindset, really that interested in facts? Or, and this is kind of my premise, are they more just interested in silencing our set of facts? And I've said this just to be clear, and I'll say it again. Any facts that come out about this story that have proof and are specific, they can't be these blanket feelings. They have to be, like, I'm talking words, names, places, dates. We will do anything in our power to promote that are relevant to the story, whether they make us look good or not, or bad. Don't care. That's less important to me. Jeez, someone's taking a shower above our head now. Hopefully that's not
2-star review.
That I think that could be a legitimate 3-star review.
I know.
We don't have a 3-star review yet. Now here's kind of, this is what's fascinating, and I've already said this, but just to reiterate, there's no facts in this entire review. There's only these general warnings. Now, there's an Instagram account that I want to call you guys' attention to. It's called Church Clarity. And I discovered this Instagram account this last summer. And let me tell you what this Instagram account does, roughly. They create a spreadsheet, and they track, I think, just 2 things. It's like egalitarian views, meaning are women allowed to be in leadership? And is the church affirming? In other words, are they accepting of homosexuals in leadership? Now, I don't even care what you believe about those things at all. All I'm pointing out is that what this website does is they have 3 ratings: yes, no, or unclear. And what this website does is they push churches to just be clear
And honest.
Hence the name Church Clarity. So the Instagram account is at Church Clarity. And this is why I've learned this work is so important. Ambiguity favors the powerful. So when there's a group, and if you look at someone and you're like, and when you're in Christian circles, the people not to trust. There's a well-known group actually it's probably true of any tribe, but our experiences in churches. And someone will be drinking too much or have sex outside of marriage or have a kid or read a fucking Rob Bell book, and the whispers will start to happen. And it will be you'll say these kind of vague things like so-and-so. I remember this one. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this involves cast of characters from people that we've already mentioned, but I'm not going to give the specific names because one of the guys that was disciplining me, named Steven, said about someone else that we were actually have become friends with, that the devil, what do you say? The enemy has them. Speaking of Satan or the devil. Come to find out, this person was in a hospital for mental, I don't know if to call it mental disability or sickness or instability or anxiety attacks or something along those lines. But all we heard was that the enemy got them, which basically means don't trust anything they say. Write them off. So I want to share one story about this and how this has impacted us, which was our story that actually started this whole podcast. It was this summer. We were planning on going to a Bible camp on Whidbey Island out in the Seattle area, which I have been at literally since being in my mother's womb.
We both have.
We met there. We've served there for probably multiple calendar years, actually, when you add up all the time. That's not true. Months. Maybe a calendar year. And we were set to volunteer cook when we were contacted in July, and we were told that we were not allowed to cook anymore because we did not believe that porn and homosexuality was a sin, according to the Bible. And I said, oh, I didn't know that we
According to their interpretation of the Bible.
Yes. And I said, oh, I didn't know that I had to believe that it was a sin to be gay, to cook. And they were like, well, you know what we mean. And I'm like, no, actually, I don't. Because I actually know how this camp operates. And when you're counseling or leading or teaching, oftentimes, some years, they had you sign a statement of faith. Other years, you didn't. And there was multiple people that didn't sign it for all sorts of different reasons. So I went to the website, and the website said something like, we believe in a biblical marriage. That's all it said about any sexuality.
So they believe in polygamy.
Exactly.
Saying.
Well, so with this Bible camp, there was all sorts of beefs I had and all sorts of beefs I didn't have. Because honestly, it wasn't that surprising when it happened. We were just kind of like, you learn to spot these things a little bit. And even though we had never taught anything about being gay, in fact, the only way they had found out was because we had made a YouTube video explaining our stance on our channel. And I think someone complained to them. But there was two things that I asked the organization to do. Not directly, but on our YouTube channel, which is one, define the rules specifically. So if you're going to tell me 3 weeks before a camp, before I drive my family across the country and rent my house out, losing thousands of dollars, that I'm not allowed, the burden is on you to explain to me why. Because I know for a fact that there were other people there that week and other weeks who believe the same thing that I do.
Well, and they got their yes man to call you. Like, the people that actually had the power to kick us out were too pussified to actually, call us up and talk to us.
That's sexist. I'm offended.
Okay, dickified. Whatever.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, so the first ask was define it specifically. The second ask is to enforce it universally. Like I said, there's people that... Okay, I don't even want to get into this. This is a side tangent. When I asked those things, I knew that it was kind of a sneaky ask because I know the camp can't do that. And the reason why I asked is not to actually get this done.
But they would get a lot of pushback. They would lose a lot of people.
But it's to point out the flaws in the system.
Yeah.
And there are flaws, and that's okay. I'm okay with flaws in systems. But I think the system that is claiming to have the Bible and Jesus and God on their side should be the first to admit that, not defend it. Mm-hmm. And this is why what this church clarity thing is doing is also really a great cause, but also impossible. The churches, the fastest growing church in America a few years back in Cincinnati area, on the outside, everyone thinks that it's gay affirming.
And probably even, I don't know, at least close to egalitarian.
It is 100% not.
Both. Yeah.
When you find out, but it takes knowing leadership and hearing from the right people, or hitting your head on a ceiling that you're not told about, to learn this the hard way. Mm-hmm. And if you really believe the fucking truth, if you believe that's what Jesus' way of saving people is, fucking start broadcasting it.
Right.
I'm actually down with that.
But it's just more convenient for them not to. That's why they don't do it.
So, this accusation that we faced, I believe, is equally vague, and I don't think it's a coincidence that is that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Where are we? I didn't put page numbers here. Okay, with this discrediting, this is very systematic, and I'm going to ask Cammie to read this quote. It's kind of long, but it's from this book, and I'm going to put these links in the no, not there, sorry, this
Next
under
page.
discrediting. I'm going to put the links to these resources in the show notes if you care later, but this is a book by Judith Lewis Herman, and it's titled Trauma and Recovery, The Aftermath of Violence from Domestic Abuse to Political Terror. Now, this is not a religious book. This is not written for churches. This is written for trauma in general. That's what makes it so interesting to me, is to see these patterns go way beyond church. This isn't an anti-church talk. This is an anti-oppression created by unjust systems talk. Okay, you want to read it?
In order to escape accountability for his crimes, the perpetrator does everything in his power to promote forgetting. Secrecy and silence are the perpetrator's first line of defense. If secrecy fails, the perpetrator attacks the credibility of his victim. If he cannot silence her absolutely, he tries to make sure that no one listens. To this end, he marshals an impressive array of arguments, from the most blatant denial to the most sophisticated and elegant rationalization. After every atrocity, one can expect to hear the same predictable apologies. It never happened. The victim lies. The victim exaggerates.
Allegedly.
The victim brought it upon herself.
Can we pause? I mean, this is like written
Well, he
for us.
didn't need to write that. Like, he could have taken the allegedly out, and it would have... He's still just talking about what we're saying, our story.
Well, he's so fucking smooth with this, because he never says we exaggerate. He just uses these phrases like, Ben, a self-proclaimed. So now he's even putting it on me.
He exaggerates for us.
Well, he's putting it on me now. He's fucking using my words against me. Ben, a self-proclaimed extreme personality. That's saying, watch out for anything this extreme personality says, because it's going to be extreme.
Right. And he even says so himself.
And then it says, facts are edited to create. Oh man, that's so good.
Okay, my second major beef with this is I know we're in the middle of reading this. Should I finish it?
Go, girl. No, you do you.
Is that he says that we're waging war against family and these other people. And to me, that's like kind of a slap in the face. It's a very, very ignorant statement, because he doesn't deserve to hear this, but I'll tell these other people. Like, I've spent countless days and nights the last 3 or 4 years in grieving over my family. Like, I fucking don't want to wage war against them. That's not my goal. That's not your goal. Like, I lost them. I lost them because they walked away from me. I'm not waging war against them. So to me, it's just like so ignorant. It's what he wants to believe. He doesn't want to believe that actually your old mentor, he doesn't care enough to talk to his sister. That's the real story here, John. Anyways.
John PDX.
John PDX. Okay.
Hang on. Now I need to riff off that, because I think you're really right. And
like he's making it so, what's the word? Like it's nothing to me. Like, as if it's like not a huge deal that what's going on.
Well, there's two things here. First of all, these people are so self-important and self-aggrandizing. They actually think we're attacking them, as if we give a shit like what they're doing, anymore. Like when someone doesn't talk to you for a year, 3 or 4, like we've actually had the wonderful benefit of having a therapist and the time and the space to fucking walk 2,200 miles, spend $10,000 in therapy, and move the hell on.
Yeah.
And they actually view this as a war that we're in.
Like, I have no grandiose ideas or expectations that I'm going to take my brother's ministry down. Like, no. He's going to go on with his life.
Because there's a demand.
And that's fine. Like, whatever, Yeah, exactly. I was there once too.
But there's other people that do care and are responding and listening to this message.
And are hurting.
Too. And don't have another voice to hear because they've been told that their voice doesn't matter either. And that's who we're speaking to.
Yes.
Not you, fuckheads. Jeez. Sorry.
Okay, back to this. So, after every atrocity, one can expect to hear the same predictable apologies. It never happened. The victim lies. The victim exaggerates. The victim brought it upon herself. And in any case, it is time to forget the past and move on. The more powerful the perpetrator, the greater is his prerogative to name and define reality, and the more completely his arguments prevail.
So basically, it's saying they'll try and silence you first. So mum's the game. Secrecy is code 1. Check. We have experienced this like crazy. Most of the things we're heard said against us, even now, even though we're off the reservation, in the words of someone that I heard recently, they won't even talk openly with each other. It's all done in one-to-one conversations. Mm-hmm. I would love to see the email or the blog or I don't even take it personally, but just like for the sake of your own religion, defend it and start coming out with the facts. Like someone discredit some of the facts we're saying if you really believe it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, just know the whole thing, even how it was done to us, the letter that excommunicated us said in the letter to not share it with us. And I'm saying that having never seen the letter, just because that's what we were told.
It was shared with us third person.
Allegedly. And then they're saying they're trying to find reality. So this is where, the few things we have, which I feel like for how much we've been through, we've said very little. In that, we're stating, I'm reading emails and documents, stating names and dates and trying to give a narrative with at least in the course of telling the story, fairly little commentary as to like, we're not telling you why people did it. We have our speculations and we're trying to make really clear when we're speculating and differentiating that from an accusation, Otherwise, I feel like the information we've given is pretty straightforward, like reporting conversations. And this was said on this date, and these were the witnesses that were there. And most of these, I'm trying to think of any case that we've reported that doesn't have multiple witnesses. And most of the witnesses are on their side most of the time.
Yeah.
Whew, okay. Now, so we've talked about what we did, but I want to talk about what this review does, okay? This is what I think John PDX is doing actually in this review. Posting incorrect and misleading facts publicly and actively discouraging people from listening to us. And what are these misleading facts, you're asking? Well, besides what we've already said, one of the statements he makes in the public review is, quote, "Well, I'm not part of the story," unquote.
This is what makes me think he didn't listen to the whole thing.
He did, because episodes 7 and 8, in episode 7, I tell a story about him. Then he contacted me after episode 7 and said, hey, this conversation did not go the way that you said. So I corrected it at the beginning of episode 8. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's one way he actually was a part of the story. As I said in episode 7, that John PDX's advice to me was to submit to David. That was the final thing he said to me when we stopped talking for a year or two after he said he talked to my old business partner, Colin. He said, you should submit to David. And then after he contacts me after 2 or 3 years, he's actually apologizing for that, which is so weird. And I'll get into that. But there's actually more ways that he's tied in with this that I'll talk in actually a little bit, because it actually starts to get a little crazy as I was just like thinking about this episode, like how tied in he actually is. But
I have this like conspiracy theory that he's like a spy, not really a spy, I suppose, but like sent out by these other people are like, hey, can you figure out what's going on here?
Well, he can figure it out after he listens to this episode. So I want to share that story because I think this is really fascinating. So he reached out to me when we came out of this episode. So there's 2 or 3 years of silence, and like a lot of people, after we weren't so what's fascinating about the quote you just read is secrecy is the main trick, and then after that, silence is what's the most important. And we were for 2 or 3 years, and guess how many people we heard from in that 2 or 3 years?
No one.
No one. Then we start sharing our story.
And then all of a sudden the cockroaches come out.
Then guess who we hear
From under the wood.
I can't even tell you the number of people that all of a sudden are really obsessed with the details of the narrative. Mm-hmm. Conveniently.
Yeah.
So then John, PDX, apologizes to me over message. To which I respond, what are you sorry for? And he doesn't really say. He's kind of like vaguely apologizing, like in some sympathetic bullshit way for the pain that we've gone through, which he actually does a lot in both his message to me and this thing. He's like, oh, your bereavement.
Almost like a nod to the pain. Okay.
Yeah, like I mourn for you. Like kind of this like, and I don't want to discredit it. Like maybe that's nice. Not helpful for me. It doesn't make a difference in my life whether someone across the country feels sad for us, honestly. But when I specifically asked him, oh, you sounds like you're apologizing. What are you sorry for? And he said, oh, do you think I should be sorry for something? And I was like, no, I don't care if you're sorry.
You're the one who said
I'm
sorry.
But if you're not sorry, like about something, we have no interest in maintaining a friendship with you. So what I think happened was, although he kind of like gave this nod of an apology, he's actually still defending his original line of thought, mm-hmm. which was 2 things. One specifically that we should talk to David, but the more important underlying thing, and this is what I told him, why we're not friends with him is because I'm going to make this more vague. We're not friends with anyone right now that believes they know better what's best for our life than we do. This was the entire Christian world. Mm-hmm. And so when he came to me and said, and he didn't know at any of our side of the story at the time, he said, oh, you should just listen to what David said. And we had been through a lot of abuse already at this time. Mm-hmm. And we were like, no, our therapist that we're paying a lot of money for and is really fucking qualified is telling us the exact opposite. Guess who we're going to go with? The person that doesn't know any part of the story, or the person who we've actually come to trust and is like, we've busted our ass with. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
So I want to ask this question because if we're going to make a whole episode about a review, we might as well ask, why do you think this review is written? And I want to talk about a comment that was left on one of the last episodes by someone named Karen E. Would you like to read it?
Yeah. I briefly looked up the Storyform Life. I see PDF files to download to use as materials to facilitate training sessions. The content seems scripture-based. If their intent is not leading people to Christ, what is their motivation?
So we had referenced that the Storyform Life and the founder of it, Jeremy, at least the co-founder of it, who is Cammie's brother, who was one of the people that excommunicated us, and the leader of this Family Teams website, has this content called the Storyform Life. And we taught it for close to 10 years. And now I actually consider the content to be fairly it's had dangerous aspects to us. I'll put it that way. So this person went to the website and says, actually, it looks pretty harmless. It looks scripture-based, and it looks like it's leading people to Christ. Mm-hmm. And she's saying, that seems fine. To which I said, reply back to the comment, like she was assuming that I was saying it's doing something else. Like it's actually asking people to join a cult or something like that. And I'm like, no, that's exactly what it's doing. It's claiming to lead people to Christ and to follow scripture based upon the way that they see it.
Right.
Now, this is the key that I want to take away from that. Because I think you can, before you ask the question, is it good to lead people to Christ or read scripture, you have to use their term, you have to look at the fruit that's actually being produced from the system itself. A system creates what it was designed to create. The results are not random. So when you have a system that creates a bunch of ostracized people that don't feel loved, but then you say, the system creates love, instead of looking at what it says, look at what it does. And you can't trust usually at all what's said. You need to look at what's done. So with that in mind, I want to look at this review and not look at what's said, because what's said, it comes across as being really about protecting integrity and truth, justice, in the American way. And looking out for us even with this, like, oh my gosh, it's sickening how twisted and manipulative it is.
I want to say, I think at some point, or we said that we weren't sharing websites, which we're not sharing websites, but we did share names of some of this stuff. So I want to
I'm not against it's not because it's anonymous. It's more because I'm not asking people to spam them or go check them out. I haven't provided the links. If you want to go look up all this stuff, I'm sure you could put the pieces together. My goal is not to make this like ambiguous and weird and confusing. My goal is to just share the story.
Okay.
Okay, so here's a few other facts that I like went back and forth on whether to share this, and finally I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I got nothing to hide. I think this is interesting stuff.
It's interesting, yeah.
So, Epifio is the business that I co-founded with
John PDX.
And two other people, including Jeremy, Cammy's brother. This was, 2009? 10 years ago? 11 years ago now?
Yeah.
Gee whiz. Now, John was one of the first people to want to leave and sell his shares. I'm assuming this is like 6 or 7 years ago. Now, when Epifio shares were sold, I was the only person in the boardroom to defend his shares and the fact that I felt like they were being undervalued. And when his offer was given by the board, which I got outvoted on, actually, I don't know that for a fact. You can check the board minutes. But I probably actually voted for it at the end of the day, but I was dissenting before the vote. But when he was presented the offer and he accepted it, I offered to pay him personally out of pocket because of the delay in when they were willing to pay him. They were going to penalize him for paying him on the spot. And I didn't feel like it was fair as we were drawing out cash from the business. So I was the only shareholder that went to him and said, I will pay you out of my own pocket to make this right. And he declined it, but that was the offer.
Yeah.
Then when he left and he went on to start his next project, which was a video project dedicated to explaining the Bible, and I had to look it up today because I was like, I felt like it was 10,000, but that seems like too high. I probably donated 5,000, or maybe it was 2,000. And I was like, maybe it was actually 1,000. But then I looked at the receipt. It was $10,000 is what we donated to support him in this new endeavor. So,
Whoop whoop.
Okay, can I get that money back?
Lesson learned.
Okay, so I'm still answering this question, why is this person writing this review, but I'm getting there in a roundabout way. And this podcast is going to be more than an hour, but hopefully you're entertained. Because that's what we do here. Hell, if you're entertained, give us 3 stars, at least, until we get an intro.
Yeah.
Okay, then This is so weird to fucking talk about. It's just true. John PDX has a podcast. Wouldn't you know it? Are we going to tell the name? No, because we don't give a shit. But it's a podcast whose explicit goal is to explain the Bible. Their podcast, here's a few facts about their podcast. When I typed in Christian podcast or something like that, it ranked number 6 of all podcasts in the world. The number 6 trending podcast on religion and spirituality. It was right below Joel Osteen and right above Tim Keller. Okay, so this is the number 6 podcast in the world on religion and spirituality. It was the top 21 in Woman's Day magazines on the best Christian podcasts to grow your faith. And we talked about, this is fun because we talked about how many reviews we have, 109. They have 6,500 reviews for a 4.5-star average. We're beating them.
Take that, motherfuckers.
Now, there was this quote I came across. Instagram is one of those like meme quote inspirational thingies. And I really liked it. It was just this last week. And it said, pay close attention to people who don't clap when you win. So here is someone who's fucking made it. They are at the top of the Christian Bible world. They have their voice. They can share what they think about the Bible and spirituality and Christian living. They've built an audience, and fucking kudos to you. You know what? I don't want my 10 grand back. I was happy to support it.
Yeah.
I was really excited about it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they can share this. And I'm glad it's helping people. Like, you know, like, that's wonderful. Have we, in fact, I mean, here's another thing to say, because I don't think I mentioned this.
Well, why do you gotta drag a puny little podcast like us down, huh?
Well, seriously.
I know.
You know, he's accusing us of going to war. I mean, we talked about not picketing, not doing all this shit. Here's another fascinating fact. I have not downvoted, actually there's one YouTube video that I downvoted, but I haven't downvoted any of these people's YouTube videos. I haven't negatively rated any of their channels, any of their podcasts. I mean, these people have done what I consider some pretty allegedly horrific things to us. At least things that have been really painful to us. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
That way we don't have to use the fucking word allegedly. Things that hurt us like hell. And I didn't go and lash out or try and dissuade people from going to their audience because I'm fundamentally opposed to that idea.
Well, I don't want to play that game.
I don't either.
Yeah.
That to me is going to war. Giving someone 2 stars that has 100 reviews when you have 6,000. Now, it's an unfair war because you're a fucking bully. But it's still war.
He like threw a grenade in a closed room. It's like, I ran away.
Now, here's what I've found, okay? And this came up in conversation. The last 2 or 3 times we've talked over the last couple of years, the conversation, there was this funny thing that was said where he kept on saying to me, hey, if you need any help, let me know. Or if there's ever anything I can do for you, you know, let me know. We'd be happy to help.
You're like 10 grand, please.
Actually, now that you mention it. And you know what? I just told him that sounded degrading and that we don't need anything. And I'm not interested in a relationship where someone treats me like a project. And this is where I've come to see, when we got kicked out of the Christian world sees it one way. They assume that you want to be back in. And for a while, we probably did. They assume that you're defining yourself by being on the outside. That's why for us to tell our story, they have to see it as like, oh, fine, if you're not going to let us in, well, we're going to bring you down. You know, they assume that we want what they have. But here's the truth. There's nothing that he has that I want. I don't want his approval. I don't care if he calls himself my friend. I don't want his advice. I don't want his money. I don't want him to shout me out or do anything. I just don't even care, because that power structure that we told you we spent so much of our life investing into, the most controversial thing we ever did was walk away from it. And in order to do that, we had to apologize to the people that we had lorded our power over. And we also, to a certain degree, had to be honest that people had lorded their power over us. Mm-hmm. And we did that internally for years before we ever went public with it. Mm-hmm. Even, like, one thing we did, you know, because we read this apology letter we sent out to 16 people, I believe.
Yeah.
And then I waited an entire year so it just wasn't confusing for relationships in order before I even read it on the vlog. This was our own apology.
Right. Yeah.
And then we read it, and we didn't even say who we sent it to. And we didn't even say why.
Right.
Because we left all those facts out. We just said, hey, guys, we believed this thing. Now we consider this dangerous, and this is what we apologized for. And this, we probably read that letter, 2 years ago now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So what I think is going on, and this is where it's speculative, but I think if you have been in this situation, you might, or for that matter, if you're still in, you might share some of these mindsets, is that when people are out, you assume someday they're going to see the light and come back and grovel and apologize and want back in. And then you have the power to let them back in or not. But if they really don't give a fuck, if they don't want back in, which I think I would argue is most the case most of the time. I used to say this about people all the time. Oh, someday they'll come back. Mm-hmm. Guess what? They never did.
They saw the light and they ran. They're like, oh.
And I actually, my biggest reason why I'm sharing with this has nothing to do with church. It actually has to do with family. I think I've seen so many people in the Christian world do this with their kids. And they're like, the parents are like, I fucking know what's better for you. And the kids are leaving and they're like, well, fine, you leave, you little shit. Someday you'll come back. They don't say little shit because they're Christian. They say, you little shoot. Someday.
You little brat.
Someday you'll come back. And guess what? A lot of times, the kids never do. And the parents wonder why.
Treated like that?
They're like, oh, it's so weird. They must not have learned their lesson yet. Yeah. So I think the fact that we don't want what he has is threatening to him. But speaking more vaguely, I think it's threatening to that belief system.
Yeah.
Because this is the proof. Now that you've seen what we've done and what he's done and how much clout we have and how much clout he has, I think it's fairly safe to say that he's not comfortable with us adding our facts to the story. Their reality, the way they see it, it cannot coexist with our reality. It's either we have to be right or they have to be right. That's why he has to discredit us for him to feel good about himself. Mm-hmm. And I've never discredited anything that they've said. I mean, I've given my explanations for why I think and what our side of the story is. But, like, I've never accused people of being liars or actively coming after us. To me, it makes all the sense in the world why people did what they did because we did it for so many years.
Yeah.
But we're okay with both sides existing. They're not. Mm-hmm. And we're actually not even trying to recruit people to our side.
Right.
You know, we're not saying, hey, everyone, share this with your friends. Hey, everyone, go tell everyone about, like, what bastards, you know, these assholes were.
Well, because I fundamentally believe they have a right to exist and believe what they want to believe, and so do I.
I'll take it a step further, and I'll say I think people that are still within that system are probably getting helped from it to a certain degree.
Sure.
A lot of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And just because it doesn't work for us right now doesn't mean it's not helpful and doesn't work for other people.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to blow the system up. I'm just trying to show people that there's life outside of the system also. But when we do that, people are trying to bring us down. That's what's so wild about this. So the irony, and if you look at who's actually creating the war here, who's warring with people, I think John PDX, I think his post is much more violent than anything we've said. Mm-hmm. If my data or my, you know, I mean, a lot of these are inferences. And the final thing I'll say with that is, in a way, we definitely are at war against a system of thought. And that system of thought is that if you're in the system, you know what's best for other people and that you're better than other people.
Yeah.
And this is why when John PDX apologized to me numerous times, all of his apologies fell flat because it was so hollow. It was so superficial. And he was like trying to be sympathetic. That was the best he could muster up, was like, oh, you're sad? I've been sad before. We're the same. I'm really sorry that you're sad. Mm-hmm. But he couldn't own any of the behaviors that actually contributed to our pain.
Yeah.
And that's why for us, it so was not enough for us to call people. I mean, the other thing that's so tragic about his accusation, the biggest line that's so, I think, so grossly wrong is the facts are edited to create clear villains and victims. I would love to see 1 ounce of proof on that. Because
to me, that's crazy because I feel like we painstakingly try to explain that we were part of the problem. We were the villain, and then we became the victim. Like, we were both. I mean, it was never black or white to us. To me, it was like, oh, we're getting what we dished out. This makes total sense.
Absolutely. And even the people that villainized us, I don't even think they're actual villains. It's why I'm not calling them to the carpet using any more details that are necessary or asking people to boycott, because I actually don't think they're the problem. I think they're fulfilling a role that other people are asking for and demanding. And in a way, I want to point out that there are villainous aspects to the system and to the roles. It's just like McDonald's, and I've used this analogy before, but you eat there, you get the fish fillet, you're like, this is incredible, extra sauce, extra pickles, chicken McNuggets, and then someone's like, oh, hey, have you seen how these animals are treated? Does it make the fish fillet sandwich wrong and everything McDonald's like disgusting? No. But it introduces some new information that now you have to be like, oh, huh. You can't have the fish fillet without the animal cruelty. Or the burgers without the
This system
meat
is
farms.
Built on the backs of animals that are being hurt or humans that are being hurt if it's this other system.
Yes, and you can't have a system of exclusive thought without treating those that don't think the same way as less than in our experience.
Yeah.
So the irony is I've never felt like a victim. I've never asked people to, we experience pain. But that wasn't actually what motivated this podcast. Like, what motivated this podcast is what I felt, and he doesn't even say it because, and this is fascinating. I wonder if this is intentional. He calls out the 3 separate Cincinnati-based ministries. He doesn't call out the one Washington one, which happens to be 200 or 300 miles from him and happens to believe something that I think is actually so far out there that he couldn't even oppose that being in Portland, which is the anti-gay belief. So there's not 3, John, there's 4 ministries. The very first one, if you look at all of our first videos, they're actually about the Bible camp.
Right.
That's why we started this channel. The Cincinnati thing is an afterthought, actually. So I'm wondering if you think, or if you're willing to stand by all your accusations for your review for what happened at the Bible camp with the gay thing, or do you think that's different because maybe you stand in a different place? Yeah. I don't know, just speculating. But I think we've accepted our responsibility and moved the fuck on, and this is where it's so weird that he's saying that he's not a part of it. He's still defending a system that refuses to acknowledge the pain of us and many others. And when we talk about it, you accuse us of making war. That's pretty damn convenient, especially when in that world, war is one of the worst things you could be accused of because it goes against supposedly what Jesus did or thought or some bullshit. Fuck that.
Well, they actually got that one right. Wow.
Oh, mercy.
All right, where are we at here?
Am I losing you?
No, I just need to wrap this baby up. Put a little
Okay.
pretty bow on it.
This is... Okay. I have a call to action. I think it's possible to hear this podcast and be like, shit, if I tell my story, I'm going to have people coming after me. And I would be lying if I said that that's not a strong possibility given our experience. But I will also say, I think there's a reason why people are coming after us. And we talked about at the beginning of the episode how many people you guys have been very gracious in taking the time and giving us 5-star reviews. And at the end of the day, I think the reason why people are giving us 5-star reviews is because we're doing one very simple thing. We are being courageous and telling our story. Mm-hmm. And
despite the consequences. Despite the 2-star reviews.
The 1-2-star review. And this is something I think anyone can do. I think a lot of people feel helpless. They feel like they don't have a podcast. They feel like they've been stripped of their confidence. They've been discredited. They've been accused, and they've been gaslighted, and they might feel crazy or incompetent. But I believe anyone can start by being more honest with their own story. Like Anne Lamott says, it's your property. No one can take it away from you. You own it.
Yep.
So I want to end reading a few kind of like more passages from that one book by Dr. Judith Herman called Trauma and Recovery that speak to telling your story, because my hope is that people listening to this would be encouraged to at least consider sharing their story more. You want to go?
Yeah. The ordinary... No. Never mind. Here it is.
Sandra, tell your story. Starting there.
Those who attempt to describe the atrocities that they have witnessed also risk their own credibility. To speak publicly about one's knowledge of atrocities is to invite the stigma that attaches to victims. It is very tempting to take the side of the perpetrator. All the perpetrator asks is that the bystander do nothing. The victim, on the contrary, asks the bystander to share the burden of pain.
We've read that in a previous episode, but the punchline is, if you do nothing, that will make the oppressor win. So if you take the inverse of that, the way to face the oppressor or the oppressive system, in our case, is to speak. Mm-hmm. To speak your truth. This is another excerpt from the same book.
The ordinary response to atrocities is to banish them from consciousness. Certain violations of the social compact are too terrible to utter aloud. This is the meaning of the word unspeakable. Atrocities, however, refuse to be buried. Equally as powerful as the desire to deny atrocities is the conviction that denial does not work. Folk wisdom is filled with ghosts who refuse to rest in their graves until their stories are told. Murder will out. Okay. Remembering and telling the truth about terrible events are prerequisites both for the restoration of the social order and for the healing of individual victims.
Sometimes it feels, especially to people that are inside and their goal is to defend the system, like where I believe John PDX's comment is coming from, we'll see certain facts and stories that are inconvenient to them as attacks and as unnecessary and as drudging up gory details that aren't helpful. But for the rest of us, we know, and we've experienced, and we've heard from so many of you overwhelmingly that our story has actually been healing to you, and it has told you that you are not crazy. Now, if we can do that just by sharing in somewhat sequential order what the hell happened to us in our basement, I think there's people around you, more than likely, that as you start to be honest about these things that are actually difficult to talk about, because what the beginning of the quote says, the ordinary response to atrocities is to banish them from consciousness. We silence ourselves. I mean, forget about other people for a second. It's so easy to say to myself, forget about that, move on, don't dwell on that.
It's not worth it.
Yeah. But there's another consequence to this, and the last two readings we have, one is this pithy Instagram quote that I found this week, which is a reality that I've experienced, by Cheryl Richardson. It says, if you avoid conflict to keep the peace, you start a war inside yourself. Now, for 3 years, we kept these things to ourselves, and it was driving us crazy, because we're sharing our story. I mean, like, transparency and honesty and authenticity and thoroughness is kind of our gig on YouTube. If you look at the range of stuff we've talked about, it's pretty wacko. You know, we get accused of TMI all the time. But this one story we were not willing to talk about. And the more we kept it a secret, I think the more it made us feel crazy. And we're not willing to do that anymore. So if assholes like John PDX, and there's more, are going to come at us and accuse us of stuff to silence us or to make themselves feel better, that's fine. But we've seen the other side of it, which is I'd rather be honest and find a new crowd than to be silent and feel crazy. And the last book we're going to read is actually from a psychological parenting book. It's called The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. And it's this excerpt from page 42 and 43. Sorry, this episode is so long. Not sorry.
Psychiatrists are denying this type of damage when they talk about grace and other spiritual qualities. In order to acknowledge the consequences of such early hidden trauma, they would first have to do some hard work on themselves. Once they become willing to face the facts, their own facts, they will lose interest in teaching others about grace and other mysteries in the name of science. Clinging uncritically to traditional ideas and beliefs often serves to obscure or deny real facts of our life history. Without free access to these facts, the sources of our ability to love remain cut off. No wonder then that even well-intended moral appeals to be loving, caring, generous, and so forth are fruitless. We cannot really love if we are forbidden to know our truth. The truth about our parents and caregivers as well as about ourselves. We can only try to behave as if we were loving. But this hypocritical behavior is the opposite of love. It is confusing and deceptive, and it produces much helpless rage in the deceived person. This rage must be repressed in the presence of the pretended love, especially if one is dependent, as a child is, on the person who is masquerading in this illusion of love. We can make great progress in becoming more honest, respectful, and conscious, thus less destructive, if religious leaders could acknowledge and respect these simple psychological laws. Instead of ignoring them, they should open their eyes to the vast damage produced by hypocrisies.
All right. Finally, I want to read a review that we got the next day from someone named Elizabeth's Country Road. This was January 3rd. The title, it's a 5-star review. And the title is Life-Changing, Honest, Thought-Provoking, and Growth-Oriented Insights.
If you have ever participated in a faith community or known someone who has, you need to hear what the Crawfords have learned, insights that could change your life. This podcast is definitely proof that real life is more interesting than fiction. If you are oriented that way, I suppose you could hear this as an elaborate tale of victims and villains, but that's not the message they are offering. Ben, Cammie, and their children have experienced a ton of pain as a result of being excluded from pretty much their whole lives, family, business, and faith community. But in the process, they have learned a ton. Now they are telling their story. and creating a space for others with similar stories, usually untold, to connect and heal.
So I guess there's more than one way to interpret what we're presenting.
It's crazy that she says the exact opposite. Like, and even kind of says that some people are going to hear this as a tale of victims and villains.
I think that's done on purpose.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I don't think that makes this less true.
Mm-hmm.
So, guys, that was a ride.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to say. We've had to let go of a lot of relationships that have been hard, but what's been helpful is to be able to look at actions instead of words, and also just look at what is helpful for us and what we want right now. And there's some people from our previous life that we've decided are no longer helpful for the stage of the journey we're on, and we've had to let them go and be okay with that. Mm-hmm. It makes it hard. And one of the ways we know is by sharing our story and seeing how people respond. All links to today's material is in the description. This podcast is available all over iTunes and Google Play and YouTube. Most of those links are down below as well. I would love it if you guys would consider sharing some aspects of your story. If you're looking for a place to do that, we have a Facebook discussion group that's private. It's screened. I hope it's safe. I hope it remains safe. And it's a place where you can dabble to share some things that have happened with you in a place where other people will not call you crazy. Because if they call you crazy, we kick them out. And also, if you want to stay updated with this podcast, I would encourage you to subscribe, however you do that, on YouTube or iTunes, because I used to spend a lot of energy, like an hour or two, posting links to this every time we release it. And I'm not going to be doing that anymore, I don't think, after this episode. So if you want to be notified, you're going to have to take care of that on your own. I'm not going to do it on Instagram necessarily. As always, guys, it's a pleasure to be able to share our story and to be given the time and the attention from you guys. Thanks for listening.
Peace.
We'll see you next time.